The crowded airport entrance felt unbearable due to the summer humidity. It's just awful. Looks like the rain isn't going to stop anytime soon. This is the worst. My sister-in-law, Terry, was clearly upset by this unfortunate situation. We were stranded on our way back from a business trip Terry had organized for her important clients, thanks to a hurricane causing flight delays. You know, Valerie, if you're a professional tour director, shouldn't you plan trips considering the weather? I was at a loss for words. Terry was the one who decided on the travel dates and destinations. All I did was research the routes and list information about the sites. Of course, I knew there was a chance of a hurricane today. I had even mentioned it to Terry beforehand, but she insisted her clients couldn't change their schedules. After a while, a car pulled up in front of us. My husband, Lex, came over with a small umbrella. Sorry for the wait. Terry, you have work tomorrow, right? You should get home and rest. Valerie, you don't have anything urgent, right? It's only a 3-hour walk from here, good for your health too. That sounds good. Health comes first, Valerie. Lex and Terry quickly got into the car to avoid getting soaked. As I watched them, Lex rolled down the driver's window and yelled, "Hey! What are you doing? Hurry up! I was joking about walking." No, it's fine. I opened the umbrella Lex brought and pointed to a nearby high-rise condo. It was a new, prominent building in the area. Terry and Lex looked at me puzzled from inside the car. It won't take 3 hours, just 3 minutes on foot. I moved into this high-rise condo recently. Terry and Lex half laughed at my words. Then, they quickly became frantic and started running after me. My name is Valerie, 44 years old. I'm a working wife and a tour director. I used to work for a major travel company but quit 10 years ago when I got married. Now that things have settled, I plan and promote tours on my own. It's not uncommon for major travel companies to outsource tour directors these days, so my job scope has expanded. I specialize in lesser-known, slightly niche destinations. The places I plan tours to often require multiple transfers on trains and buses or trekking through rugged terrain. At first, many people are hesitant about my tours, but in the end, they usually leave satisfied. Of course, I also handle tours of famous landmarks and have always been popular with older clients, likely because of my gentle demeanor. I had always been close to my grandmother, so I found it easy and enjoyable to talk with older people and listen to their stories. Traveling together to various landmarks created a sense of unity, and though our time was short, we formed close bonds. I felt a sense of fulfillment and pride in my work as a tour director. One day, I was invited to Lex's parents' house. They had just finished remodeling their home, and this was their housewarming party. Lex and I bought a cake for the occasion and headed to their house. This area has really changed a lot, Lex said, narrowing his eyes as he looked around. We got married 10 years ago. And back then, this area was just a barren, desolate lot. It had once been a forest, bought by a real estate company that planned to build condos, but the local residents opposed it. As a result, the empty lot remained for years until recently, when new houses started being built. Well, it's good that the area is becoming more lively, but I wonder if the new residents understand the hardships of living in the countryside. But with a big grocery store nearby, this place might not stay so rural. If more young people move in and the area becomes bustling, it could turn out to be a great place. Yeah, and if the area gets busier, Terry's shop will thrive, which is a good thing. I swallowed my response to Lex's words. Lex's sister, my sister-in-law Terry, runs an apparel shop. She used to have a small store in a prime city location but had to return to the countryside due to rent and other issues. We were worried about her opening an apparel shop in such a rural area, but with the recent population growth, her shop has been booming. More homes and commercial facilities are being built, and Terry proudly proclaimed that her shop was secure. "Hello," we said as we arrived at Lex's parents' house. The remodeled house looked beautiful, and Lex's parents were happily explaining all the improvements and insulation details. I listened earnestly, because I genuinely enjoyed hearing about it. Stories about how the house had improved and what issues they faced were fascinating to me. "Come on, Mom, Dad. Valerie isn't interested in that stuff," Terry said, munching on snacks and drinking beer in the middle of the day. I smiled slightly and replied, "No, it's interesting." But Terry snorted and pointed at me. "Are you still working as a tour director, Valerie?" "Yes, I regularly get work from older people who are unsure about planning trips." "So, you're basically just catering to old folks?" "Don't use our parents as practice subjects." I exchanged glances with my parents-in-law and felt my shoulders slump slightly. Terry seemed to dislike me. More accurately, she looked down on me. She had always flaunted her talent for running her own store from a young age and had an occasionally condescending attitude that bothered me. Being my sister-in-law, I couldn't talk back. I had to admit, though, that her business acumen was genuinely impressive. "Well, it's a pretty dull job, isn't it? Planning tours for old folks?" "It lacks any glamour," Terry said. "Terry, are you drunk?" Lex asked. "I'm not drunk. I sell clothes that I personally select from overseas in my own store. In other words, I'm selling my own sense of style." "Then Valerie is doing the same thing. She's selling her sense of travel plans that she chooses," Lex retorted. Terry let out an exaggerated sigh. I nudged Lex, trying to signal that I didn't want to engage further with Terry, but he didn't understand and tilted his head in confusion. "But Valerie plans trips to rural areas, right? Her sense of style must be quite interesting," Terry said with a hint of sarcasm. Her words about my interesting sense of style made my smile freeze. There was always a slight sting in her remarks. If it was just a matter of being disliked, I could understand. But Terry often called me out of the blue on her days off. "Valerie? I need a favor. One of my important clients wants a guided tour of some landmarks. Can you come?" Is this a job request?" "Stop joking and come quickly. I'm keeping people waiting." After she abruptly hung up, I consulted Lex. It was supposed to be a relaxing Sunday. Lex, tired from work, didn't want to get involved in my issues with his sister, so he ignored my words. Left with no choice, I drove to where Terry had summoned me. I ended up chauffeuring an elderly couple I had never met before, giving them a free tour of various landmarks. Even though it wasn't a job, I felt it would be rude to be careless, so I treated them with the same care as my paying clients. Terry, enjoying the arrangement, began calling me every weekend to play host to her clients. Feeling this was unreasonable, I confronted Lex. Initially sympathetic, he grew increasingly irritated. "What's the big deal? You hate doing favors for Terry that much?" "I'm a tour director by profession. If she's going to rely on my skills every week, she should at least hire me properly." "Look, you're helping Terry's important clients, and she appreciates it. Isn't that enough?" Our disagreements deepened over time. I believed that regardless of the relationship, work deserved compensation. Lex insisted that gratitude was enough compensation. I argued that monetary compensation was the basic principle of labor. You're so materialistic. Happiness isn't about money. You can't buy happiness with money. I swallowed my retort. That wasn't the point I was trying to make. One day, I was leaning back in the back seat of a small bus, slowly sipping water under the blazing sun. The bus engine was off, making the interior stiflingly hot, but I didn't care. I gazed out at the high-rise condominiums. It was a stark contrast to the peaceful scenery I was used to, with skyscrapers lining the bustling urban landscape. I was invited by Terry to join her on a trip. And as expected, a large number of her regular customers gathered, treating me as the tour director. Terry had arranged for a small bus, but I was made to act as the guide, carry luggage, and handle various other tasks, leaving me exhausted. After being thoroughly used up, the group finally disbanded in the evening. Terry innocently invited me for dinner, saying, "At least let me treat you to dinner." After having a meal at a nearby restaurant, we stepped outside to head home and noticed the ominous clouds. We had heard on the news that a typhoon was approaching, but it seemed to have made landfall earlier than expected. An announcement echoed through the airport, informing us of flight delays due to the typhoon. Terry and I exchanged worried glances. We boarded our plane and arrived at the nearest airport. It started to rain, and a long line began forming at the taxi stand. Watching the increasingly heavy rain from the airport entrance, the wind howled and dark clouds covered the sky. Next to me, Terry was holding her smartphone to her ear, glaring at the sky with a sour expression. "Lex? This is such a mess." "Yes, it's pouring. It didn't rain during the trip, thank goodness, but now the taxi stand is crowded and we can't get home. Can you pick us up?" I glanced around. The airport cafe was full, and the entrance area was unpleasantly humid due to the summer weather. Terry was visibly irritated by the unfortunate situation, pouting her lips. "It's terrible, isn't it? The rain doesn't look like it will stop anytime soon. This is the worst." Terry ran her hand through her hair and dropped her bag on the floor. The rain blowing in had created puddles, soaking her shoes and adding to her frustration. "Valerie, as a professional tour director, shouldn't you plan trips while considering the weather on the day of travel?" I was at a loss for words. It was Terry who had set the dates and chosen the tourist spots. I had only researched the routes and listed information about the attractions. Of course, I knew there was a chance of a typhoon today. I had informed Terry about it in advance, but she had insisted that her clients' schedules couldn't be changed. After a while, a car stopped in front of us. Lex approached with a small umbrella. "Sorry for the wait." "Terry, you have work tomorrow, right? You should get home and rest." "Valerie, you don't have any urgent work, right? You can walk home from here in about 3 hours. It's good for your health." "That might be a good idea." "Health first, Valerie." Lex and Terry hurriedly got into the car, avoiding the rain. As I watched them absent-mindedly, Lex rolled down the driver's side window and yelled, "Hey! What are you doing? Hurry up! I was joking about walking home." "What? No, it's fine." I opened the umbrella Lex had brought and pointed at a high-rise condominium a short distance away. It was a newly built, prominent symbol tower in the area. Lex and Terry looked at me with puzzled expressions from inside the car. "It won't take 3 hours. It's only a 3-minute walk. Come on, enough with the silly jokes. Just get in the car. There's luggage in the back seat, but you can push it aside and get in." "No, really, it's fine. I moved into that high-rise condominium." Terry and Lex laughed half-heartedly at my words. Ignoring them, I I ran through the heavy rain towards the condominium. I unlocked the entrance and placed my luggage on a sofa near the front desk, lightly wiping myself down. The friendly concierge handed me a clean towel, and I thanked him. As I unlocked the elevator to head to my floor, I heard Terry shouting behind me.
Hey, hey, hey! What's going on here?
Terry was frantically yelling in front of the auto-locked door, banging on it and randomly pressing the keypad. The concierge noticed Terry's erratic behavior and looked at her suspiciously.
Concierge? Can you open this door, please?
I'm sorry, but what is your business here?
I'm Valerie's sister. Valerie! Open up! Do you live here? Tell me.
Waiting for the elevator, I began to feel a bit scared. Terry looked at me with a mix of disbelief and envy. Shortly after, Lex arrived at the entrance, drenched from the rain. He stared at me entering the high-rise condominium with a look of utter disbelief. As I got into the elevator, my smartphone started ringing from inside my bag. The caller was Terry. Ignoring it, I saw Lex's name appear next. They called almost alternately, followed by a stream of messages. My home was on a middle floor of the high-rise condominium. The apartment was still mostly unfurnished, with no curtains on the windows. Only the kitchen light bulb was installed, so I relied on its dim glow as I changed clothes in the semi-darkness. Without curtains, I could clearly see the dazzling night view. I imagined the kind of words that only successful people might say, looking at such a view. Among the regular clients for whom I served as a tour guide, there were quite a few wealthy individuals. I didn't know the details, but one of them had apparently made a fortune in real estate. He was particularly fond of my meticulous guiding and began a personal association with me. Through this relationship, I found myself mingling with people who could be called celebrities. They often said, almost in unison, that they had been busy with work when they were young and now wanted to enjoy traveling in their retirement. Word of mouth continued to bring in customers, and I was inundated with high-paying tour guide requests. The earnings were substantial, allowing me to stretch my finances a bit and move into a high-rise condominium. I stared at my smartphone for a while. Lex was calling persistently, so I reluctantly decided to answer. His voice on the other end was oddly gentle and coaxing. Valerie? Why are you living in such a luxurious condominium? Where did you get the money? Have you forgotten something? I began explaining in a polite tone, much like I did when working as a tour director. The reason I had moved into a high-rise condominium was simple. Lex and I were already divorced. A few months ago, Lex had handed me divorce papers, demanding that I sign them right in front of him. I spent days wondering how our relationship had deteriorated to this point. There was no significant issue between us, just small cracks that grew into a large chasm. Thinking back, it was Terry's constant exploitation of me to accompany her clients on their trips that dissatisfied me. Lex, never defending me and always siding with Terry, widened the rift between us. I always said I was dissatisfied with just words of gratitude as compensation for my work.
But if you can earn enough to live in such a high-rise condominium, you don't need money, right? Terry is family. Words of gratitude should be enough. What's the problem?
I thought of responding but closed my mouth. I was already fed up. Despite this, I hadn't submitted the divorce papers for a long time, knowing that Lex used them out of momentary anger or as a threat. I understood that he didn't really want a divorce. But now, things were different. I no longer cared about the responsibilities of marriage, societal appearances, or vanity. I was willing to trouble my company, siblings, parents, and anyone else just to be free from Lex. I hated the version of myself that kept my emotions bottled up, constantly enduring and wavering. The divorce was finalized just recently. I had planned to tell Lex about the finalized divorce and that I would be leaving soon, but then Terry dragged me on a trip. "Just let me in. We need to talk." "Terry, too," Lex pleaded. Why should Terry be involved in a matter between me and my husband? I took the documents from the bookshelf, placed them in a clear file, and left the apartment. When I returned to the entrance, Terry was being held back by a security guard, trying to shake free. But upon seeing me, she suddenly became meek and looked up at me with wide eyes.
"Valerie, just let me see your place for a moment. It's amazing. How much did it cost?" "Hey, Valerie. How dare you file the divorce papers without telling me?" "Sure, I signed them, but really, if you were serious about submitting them, you'd at least consult me first," Lex ranted.
Both of them were speaking selfishly, saying whatever they wanted. As far as I was concerned, I had already given up on Lex, and Terry was less than a stranger to me. I took a deep breath and then spoke clearly to settle any lingering issues. "Listen. The divorce with Lex is already finalized. Lex, Terry, we are no longer connected. This is disturbing the other residents, so please leave."
Wait. You can't just end it like that. We need to talk about the division of assets, given that you're living in such a high-end condominium,"
Lex countered. I had anticipated this turn of events. I handed the clear file I had prepared to Lex. Inside were records I had secretly kept of the mental anguish caused by Lex and Terry, including footage from hidden cameras capturing their harassment at home. A lawyer had supervised the preparation of these documents, which proved that our marriage had significant issues and that the divorce was justified. It also mentioned that I could claim compensation for defamation in a divorce court. Lex stared at the documents in a daze as I spoke calmly.
"Those documents. They're just to show that a lawyer is on my side. I'm not actually going to claim compensation in a divorce court."
"But if I complain about the division of assets?" I looked him in the eye and nodded slightly. Lex leaned against the entrance wall and sighed. The rain and wind were gradually calming down, but clouds still hung low in the night sky. Lex muttered, in a tiny voice. It was so quiet that it sounded to me like he regretted not siding with me instead of Terry.
"Lex, as a husband, you couldn't control Valerie properly. You were always taking Valerie's guide fees from me,"
Terry accused.
"What?"
I exclaimed involuntarily. Apparently, whenever I accompanied Terry as a tour guide, a few $100s were handed over to Lex. In other words, Lex had been secretly taking money while letting me be used by Terry. I had been exploited all along. Suddenly, something snapped inside me. It wasn't anger anymore, it felt like a sense of liberation. "Fine, whatever. Divorce is none of my business," Terry said dismissively.
"Terry, there's something I wanted to talk to you about,"
I said, trying to keep my tone calm. Terry looked puzzled. She had often visited our house and once left behind a notebook that looked like a ledger. I hadn't understood the numbers written in it. But during my time as her tour guide, I had heard some strange rumors.
"I happened to meet a lady wearing a brand I know, and we started chatting. We got to talking about prices, and something felt off,"
I explained. The price she paid at Terry's select shop seemed exorbitantly high. Of course, as a private business, Terry was free to set her prices. But having been to her shop several times, I knew it didn't stock such high-end items.
"I thought maybe there was a mistake in pricing or misreported sales, which could be a serious issue."
I continued. What do you mean? Terry asked, her voice rising. I reported it to the police. I told them about the hidden ledger you left at my house and the suspected tax evasion. At that, Terry lunged at me with a terrifying expression I had never seen before. She grabbed my clothes, trying to push me down, but the security guard quickly pulled her away. She continued to scream insults at me while struggling violently. Within minutes, the police arrived, having already been notified by the condominium security about the disturbance. The scene became chaotic. Terry thrashed and shouted at the officers and security guards, and Lex, trying to intervene, ended up getting slightly injured. In the end, both Terry and Lex were taken away by the police, leaving the entrance quiet once more. I apologized profusely to the concierge before returning to my apartment. I sat in the kitchen, staring at the soft glow of the light bulb. The next day, I focused on preparing for my new life. Terry was detained by the police under suspicion of tax evasion due to the hidden ledger. Lex was released shortly after but immediately called me, begging,
Please, cancel the divorce.
I ignored him. My feelings for Lex were completely gone. And nothing he said could change that. As a result of the investigation, it was found that Terry had been falsifying her sales records, leading to back taxes. The financial hit and loss of trust from the police involvement caused her shop to lose customers rapidly, and it closed within a few months. The additional taxes were substantial, plunging Terry into debt and destroying her reputation as a competent businesswoman. Life is frightening because it can suddenly take a turn for the worse like this. Lex, on the other hand, spread rumors at his workplace that I had divorced him as soon as I started earning enough to afford the high-rise condo. He said I was ungrateful, but Lex, who always complained, eventually became disliked and lost his standing at the company. Terry even stormed into Lex's company unannounced. She claimed that Lex couldn't properly discipline me, which is why my store went bankrupt. She rampaged through the office, making outrageous accusations. Lex eventually resigned to escape Terry, who came to the office every day begging for money. Now, he drifts from place to place, working odd jobs and living in poverty. Terry's resentment continues as she goes from one relative's house to another, gathering information in her relentless search for Lex. She is truly a terrifying person. Since then, I've turned my condominium into an office and officially started my business as a tour director. Originally, it wasn't fitting for me to live in such a luxurious condominium on my income alone. From the beginning, I planned to use the condominium as both my residence and office, targeting wealthy clients. The office's location needed to have a certain prestige. An elderly couple, who came to my office, is now chatting in the living room. We are about to discuss new travel plans with them. It's their first overseas trip. I will accompany them and guide them through various landmarks. This is my job. It's the best job, where I feel I shine the most, and I will continue to take pride in it and work hard.
Don't you think it's time for a generational change? When you're not feeling well, the younger ones can take over, and there are plenty of replacements for an old woman like you.
Exactly.
Let the young people handle all the work.
I was on the receiving end of such sarcastic remarks again today from Ingrid, my boss who is about 10 years younger, and Tanner, a member of the executive team. I never thought just doing my job would subject me to this much criticism. To be honest, I was feeling at my limit, and even the job I loved was starting to become unbearable.
Understood. Then I quit. I won't be coming in from tomorrow.
I left my pre-prepared resignation letter on the table and quickly left the office. Whatever happens to that company from now on, it's not my business. Feeling a sense of relief deep down, I realized I was at peace with my decision. My name is Sophia. a 55-year-old single mother. My ex-husband had an affair in his 30s, leading to marital strife and eventual physical confrontations. So I divorced him to escape from him. My daughter Sarah, who was still in elementary school at the time, remembers those days. She told me how hard it was for her to watch, which was confirming to me that getting divorced was the right decision. Afterwards, I threw myself into my work to raise Sarah, hopping from job to job as businesses closed. I was careful not to fall ill, but I had to do everything I could for Sarah's future. I want Sarah to have as many experiences as possible, good or bad. I don't want being a single mother take her happiness away. That's something I've always wished for, even after she became an adult. But Sarah started staying home more, concerned about me. She has been helping around with house chores since she was little, which made her more mature than her peers. I've asked her if she was overexerting herself, but she always smiles and says,
"If it can lessen your burden, Mom, it's no problem at all."
What a sweet child. To be able to witness Sarah's growth up close and feel happiness. It's a reminder that I can't become complacent in our situation. Sarah's long-term boyfriend also made me feel this way. When he came over to greet us, he turned out to be a kind man who even helps with household chores. This is why I needed a self-improvement as well. But honestly, I was worried that my age would prevent me from getting job offers. Although luckily, it seems I've managed to find a company that values the administrative sales skills I developed in my previous job. Plus, it's conveniently located near our apartment, just a 10-minute walk away. With supermarkets lining the streets near our apartment, we're surprisingly well off. When I told Sarah that I had landed a job in sales, which I'm particularly good at, she seemed very relieved. I remember I was around 43 years old when I joined the company. Being considerably older, I felt like not being one of the younger new hires was a disadvantage. However, upon entering the company's meeting room, I saw another new female employee. We exchanged polite nods, and she smiled and bowed in response. At that time, we interacted as fellow new hires. Her name was Ingrid, aged 33. Now, 10 years later, she's my boss. Despite the 10-year age gap, I couldn't help but think she had been raised well based on how gracefully she sat in her chair. She always had a subtle makeup, her smile was so charming and I envied her for it. I thought she was such a nice girl and looked forward to getting along with her. Just talking with Ingrid was enjoyable. I wondered when was the last time I felt this way about someone. Honestly, I had a very good impression of Ingrid. But perhaps it was too early to judge someone without knowing their character. After joining the company, I went through proper training and started working alongside my colleague Ingrid. She talked about her college days and hoped to utilize what she had learned. She really was a hard worker. Seeing Ingrid so dedicated to her work inspired me to do my best. As the busy days went by, before I knew it, about 5 years had passed. One day, during a morning assembly in March, our boss at the time said,
"I have an announcement to make to everyone."
Ingrid then stepped forward, smiled gently, and bowed.
"Starting from April, I'll be taking a leading position. Please, I'd appreciate all of your support."
After Ingrid finished her greeting, there was a round of applause from all the employees. Becoming a manager wasn't uncommon. Yet, why did it seem like all the employees were on Ingrid's side? I had my doubts, but it seemed appropriate to celebrate this moment. I too clapped louder than usual, congratulating Ingrid on her new role. By April, when Ingrid turned 38, she had smoothly transitioned into her role as the manager overseeing all staff. As a former colleague, I no longer had to be cautious around Ingrid, who had been promoted earlier. However, since Ingrid's promotion, she started to look down on me. Whether it was work-related or even during breaks, she would dump loads of documents on me.
"You have a longer career than I do, so you should be able to finish this easily, right? Good luck, Sophia."
Ingrid said this with a dismissive laugh as she handed me the work. Furthermore, upon checking the documents, I found resumes of new hires, which made me wonder if she intended to give me a recruitment role. I couldn't understand what she was thinking. The documents contained many items necessary for administrative work. Not just the tasks I was originally supposed to do, but also duties as a recruitment officer, and it seemed she wouldn't listen to any complaints I might have. However, my previous boss had recognized my skills. Thanks to him, I was entrusted with administrative sales tasks. I felt immense gratitude towards my previous boss, who focused on developing each person's skills based on their strengths. With gratitude, I have been making an effort to complete my work diligently. I couldn't help but to think that dumping work on someone without considering their feelings was questionable. Moreover, some of the documents included tasks that Ingrid was supposed to do herself. What is going on? Confused, I decided to ask Ingrid about it. However, the words that came out of her mouth were unbelievable.
You've been working longer than I have, haven't you? If you can't do this much, there's no point in working at all.
The notion of Ingrid delegating her tasks to a subordinate, moreover, the excessive amount of work, started to stir anger within me. But causing a scene would solve nothing. I managed a gentle smile and said to Ingrid,
I see. You gave me the work because I've been here longer, right? But don't you think it's odd to pass your own tasks on to someone else?
Ingrid, looking smug, scoffed at my words.
I am your superior. I'd appreciate it if you'd stop talking back.
What kind of attitude is that? Ingrid's demeanor had changed completely since she was promoted. It was as if she had become a different person. The reason for this change would become clear later, but at that moment, I had no choice but to suppress my anger. I wanted to voice my complaints, but being an employee, I couldn't afford to be fired. Despite my mixed feelings, I had to endure. One day, we were informed during the morning assembly that an executive will be visiting. An executive, huh? I wondered what kind of person they would be. Then, just after 10 a.m., an unfamiliar man walked in. He was dressed in a black suit, with his hair neatly styled. He didn't look flashy, but his sharp gaze was somewhat intimidating. Standing before the employees, he introduced himself as Tanner, presumably around the same age as Ingrid.
I will be serving as an executive here. I've been assigned to this company starting today. I look forward to working with you.
Tanner bowed politely and flashed a business smile, charming many of the female staff. It was hard to imagine anyone not liking him at first glance. However, based on my experience, men like him are always two-faced. I thought this because my ex-husband too had a charming smile. He was considerate, willingly participated in household chores, and seemed kind. Yet, I discovered his infidelity while preparing dinner one day, overhearing a call he claimed was work-related but was actually with another woman. If it had been work, his expression would have turned serious. But instead, he looked happily engaged. This led to a confrontation, fights, and eventually divorce. Fortunately, I had consulted a lawyer before our divorce, leading to a successful claim for compensation in the divorce settlement, which helped me raise Sarah until she came of age. In a way, I had to be thankful to my cheating ex-husband. Back to the story about the company, it seemed that Ingrid, my female boss, and Tanner, the executive, started spending more time together. I wasn't certain, so I decided to ask one of the employees during lunch break. It turned out that Ingrid and Tanner were indeed in a relationship. So, they were considered a couple in their 40s. From my perspective, they were a couple 10 years younger. I didn't want to interfere with their romance, but they were openly flirting in front of everyone, regardless of whether it was during work or in their private time. Honestly, I wished they would save such displays of affection for outside of work. It felt like they were flexing their relationship. While recalling the times with my ex-husband almost brought me to tears. Ingrid approached me, boasting with a proud smile. Despite everything, Ingrid and I were former colleagues. We both liked to speak our minds, so we often had honest conversations. However, Ingrid looked down on me with a sense of superiority, reminiscing about when we first joined the company. As Ingrid and Tanner took on their new roles, and another 5 years passed. I entered my 50s and suddenly started experiencing pain all over my body. Thanks to that, I ended up going to the hospital, where I was prescribed medication. Without it, I would have been unable to maintain my health. For example, if I said I was feeling unwell and needed a day off, I'd be called an old person. And if I asked for help because I was struggling, I'd be told that after working for so many years, I should be able to manage. I wished they could be more considerate. Would speaking out get me fired? There are cases where people are let go at the whim of their boss. To make matters worse, Ingrid publicly announced my age to all employees, portraying herself as a young and attractive woman. Just as my anger was reaching its peak, Ingrid and Tanner came over to my desk. with Ingrid rudely sitting on it. Glaring sharply, Ingrid mockingly laughed and said,
"Scary."
Tanner, standing beside her, believed only what Ingrid said and looked down on me.
"What do you want?"
I asked, listening to their request. However, the words that came out of their mouths were unbelievable.
"Don't you think it's time for a generational change? After all, the young ones should be doing it, and there are plenty of replacements for an old woman like you."
Exactly. The work should be left to younger people like us. Hearing this, I was shocked. But I realized it was better to leave such a workplace. Looking at them, I smiled broadly and said,
"Understood. Then I quit. I won't be coming in from tomorrow."
I left my prepared resignation letter on the table and quickly exited the company. Whatever happens to that company from now on is no concern of mine. Thinking this, I felt a sense of relief deep inside. Upon returning home, I immediately contacted not only Sarah but also my best friend, Karen. I just wanted to feel at ease now. I wanted them to hear about what happened at the workplace I had just left. When I called, both of them encouraged me, saying,
"You did well."
And I couldn't stop the tears of joy. Sarah mentioned she had an important job to finish but would come over as soon as she was done. Meanwhile, Karen said she'd come right over, so I'm currently waiting at home. About an hour later, the sound of the doorbell woke me up. I had fallen asleep waiting, perhaps due to the exhaustion from work. Peeking through the door's peephole, I saw Karen standing there. When I opened the door, Karen hugged me, looking worried.
"What happened?" "What do you mean, what happened? I've been telling you since high school to consult with me before reaching your limit."
Karen was visibly upset, almost like a mother to me, which made me burst into laughter. She's so kind, like a reliable sister, it's comforting. But I knew this wasn't the time to be fully at ease, since it was because of those two that I had to quit my job. If I want Sarah to be happy, it would be wrong not to stand up now. As a mother, I should be able to overcome even the greatest obstacles. "It's okay, I'll be okay." Watching me try to regain my composure, Karen, who knows how to be polite when guests come over, said she'd like some tea if I had any. I hurriedly prepared the tea and poured it into cups. "You haven't changed, Sophia."
What? Is that a dig?" No, I meant it in a good way."
Being told this at such a time was mentally challenging. If it was meant positively, then there's no issue. I prepared my own cup of tea and sat on the sofa.
"So, can you tell me about this former colleague and the executive?"
Karen's serious look made me realize she wanted to hear the whole story. I decided to tell Karen about everything that had happened with Ingrid Tanner. How Ingrid, who was 10 years my junior and a former colleague, became a boss at the company. How Tanner became an executive at the same company around that time. And how those two apparently started dating and then my harassment increased. After hearing everything, Karen became visibly upset, her fidgeting intensifying. A habit of hers when she's angry, which she has had since we were young. Her husband has told her to work on it, but it's a hard habit to break. Knowing Karen was angry on my behalf was comforting. I wasn't the only one upset. Caught up in my feelings, Karen suddenly grabbed my shoulder and said,
"Come work at my hotel." "What?"
I was taken aback by Karen's sudden offer. Indeed, I had worked at Karen's hotel a long time ago, back when I was in my 30s. It's been about 20 years since then, so I assumed Karen's parents had forgotten about me. But that's what I thought. Karen mentioned that her parents wanted to hire me, believing that the hotel would become livelier with me there. The work at the hotel wasn't just about sales, it included cleaning, cooking, and working at the reception. I had experienced a variety of tasks there, and I truly enjoyed that time. It was very gratifying to be thanked with a smile by guests as they left. I had been hoping to do it again, so this offer was very welcome and appreciated. But was it really okay? Would moving to another job so soon after quitting my previous one not be a bother? Even if they welcomed me, I didn't want to end up being looked down upon like I was before. When I voiced these concerns, Karen reassured me that since it was her parents' recommendation, I didn't need to worry about that aspect. Feeling assured that I could work at the hotel without worry, Sarah returned home. I explained the situation to Sarah, and she became as angry as Karen had been.
"I won't forgive those two. Mom deserves to be happy," she said. "Thank you,"
I said, hugging Sarah. I also mentioned that my next job might be at the hotel where Karen serves as the manager. Sarah responded with enthusiasm.
I'll do it too.
Apparently, she had decided to quit her job as of tomorrow. With that settled, Sarah and I began to prepare. Karen mentioned that there was a dormitory near the hotel for employees, rarely used, and offered to show us. I'm fortunate to have such a great friend. Karen is too good for me. While feeling moved, we managed to get most of our preparations done. The next day, when the doorbell rang and I opened the door, there stood Ingrid and Tanner with distressed expressions. What do they want? If they were here to complain about not being able to handle the work I left behind, I wasn't interested. And of course, even if they asked me to return to the company, I had no intention of doing so. However, they immediately began to apologize profoundly. They were even crying on my doorstep, begging for help. I decided to at least hear them out and invited them inside. Ingrid and Tanner were completely deflated. The pair who had once looked down on me now silent and heads bowed. The sight of this role reversal was amusing, but I held back my laughter. There was no rush to listen to their story.
Just to be clear, I've quit the company, so you're just strangers to me now. But remember, I've recorded all your actions and words towards me.
I told them, showing them the recordings on my mobile phone. This advice had come from Karen back when I was still employed, suggesting that recording could serve as evidence if needed. It turned out to be quite effective against the two.
Stop! I was wrong. It was wrong of me to look down on people. That's not all, is it? You tried to sway the entire staff to your side by taking them to high-end stores, didn't you?
Ingrid looked surprised and wide-eyed, as if to say, "How did you know about that?" I couldn't gather solid evidence, but I managed to hear a story from one of the employees, which I recorded. The employee, a man, told me he went out to dinner because Ingrid seduced him with her charm. Being single, he had some expectations, but they just disbanded right after the meal, without any progress. Ingrid got a raise, and he felt he hadn't grown at all, which disappointed him. There were rumors of other men involved with Ingrid. Such stories seemed to have become somewhat of a rumor. When I explained all this, Ingrid was too shocked to say anything. Tanner, on the other hand, was the one unable to contain his anger, shouting about the presence of other men. I coldly retorted, "You're one to talk." Tanner's assignment to our company was due to his philandering being exposed at his previous job. It was meant to cool him down, sending him to a male-dominated sales department. But his penchant for women only flourished. It was only a matter of time before the president would hear of it. I knew this from a conversation I had with the president, which I also recorded. After playing all my recordings to them, they sat in silence. However, I had something I wanted to ask.
So, what do you want exactly?
Surprised by my question, they shifted uncomfortably. Tanner spoke up for a mute Ingrid. "We're in trouble without a hiring manager. So, we were hoping, you'd come back."
No way. It's your job now. I've already found another place to work starting today. You can't demand anything from a former employee, right?
Resignation is a right given to employees. If they tried to take that right away, I'd have to act against them as a black company. Upon hearing this, they pleaded,
"Please, not that."
In panic, I yelled for them to leave and chased them out. I didn't want anything to do with them anymore. Healing the wounds they caused me would be difficult. Closing the door, I let out a deep sigh of relief, tears welling up as I finally felt it was over. Then, the male employee who helped with the recording contacted me. Ingrid and Tanner went back to the company and apparently sought out the president, asking for their managerial and executive roles to be revoked. They confessed everything, expressing concern for me. The previous boss was the current president, who had expressed concern for my health. Promptly, new supervisors and executives were appointed from among other employees. The president mentioned that moving forward, care would be taken to ensure work could be done more peacefully. This was communicated to all employees by the president during a morning meeting, leading me to be certain of its truth. Ingrid and Tanner, now demoted to regular employees, were working hard. Tanner, back to being an employee for the first time in a while, admitted he hadn't realized how hard it was. Looking down on people is a lesson learned the hard way. What goes around comes around. Being serious about work is not only natural but crucial. Later, I became responsible for cleaning at the hotel. When I expressed a desire to try something different from sales, Karen readily agreed. Sarah joined me, becoming the face of the hotel at the reception. Karen's husband, a chef, had several apprentices, making a team of 5. Tasting their cooking, I thought it was heavenly. As we settled into dorm life, Sarah and I found ourselves discussing more positive topics. Enjoying the smiles of our guests made this job the most comforting. Sarah said,
"I'm glad for you."
For Sarah, my happiness was all that mattered. Wanting to support me and be a confidant forever.